Hey everybody, I'm Pastor Jacob, and this is my first year as the pastor of Blue Mound United Methodist Church, and I'm documenting that, talking to the camera weekly, talking to you on a weekly basis. And I think I've decided to start labeling this or any communication that I send out publicly to be from the pastor's desk. I just kind of like that. It's communication is important, and I can't always have everybody just come into my office and sit across from me and just talk. And so that's kind of what I treat this as. If I send out a letter, that's kind of what I treat that as. And so I might start referencing this as from the pastor's desk. Adjusting my chair. Anyways, I think that's a little bit better. So this past Sunday, I talked about stewardship as trust. We're in the midst of a little bit of a stewardship emphasis as we prepare our budgets as a church for the upcoming year. And so when I talk about stewardship as trust, because often I think of, I want to provide for my family, right? Especially with the culture we live in, there's a lot of pressure specifically on men to bring home the bacon, to make a lot of money. I don't know why, but there is. That's the reality of the world we live in. And so when it comes to money, is it me trusting in my ability to earn so that I can provide nice things or food or sustenance for my family? But when I put money in the offering plate, when I spend my time on church things above and beyond the call of vocational ministry, when I express my faith to God, when I steward my time and my talents and my finances in a way that sacrificially puts it in God's hands, back in God's hands rather, it's saying that, God, I trust you to provide what I can't. I trust you to provide for me, because really all that I am and all that I have is a gift from you, God. And so I like to think of stewardship as trust. And with that, I have all these stories about how God has shown up in my life in some really weird ways, financially. Sometimes you may hear of people who've received random checks in the mail, or who have had other sorts of financial blessings that just were kind of inexplicable. And I'm a person that has a lot of those stories. And I chose specifically not to use any of those stories in the midst of my sermon, because I certainly don't want to come across as a prosperity gospel preacher. The amount of blessings that we receive from God, whether they be financially or otherwise, is not in direct proportion to our diligence of work in faith. It's not a quid pro quo. It's not I put $10 in, I'm going to get $100 back. It's not. That's not how it goes. But at the same time, there's something to be said about God's favor, and I don't know really how to articulate that very well, and so I don't want to talk about things that I can't explain from the pulpit. But anyways, nonetheless, I believe that God can and will and does provide beyond reason for people. And that it is in some way, somehow, in relationship to the person's relationship with God. Not necessarily their level of holiness or the amount they put in the plate or anything. I don't know exactly how to explain it, so I'm fumbling here again. But have a good relationship with God. Please. Put your trust in God. Because when you do that, I don't believe you will be let down. It doesn't necessarily always mean that our loved one is going to miraculously get up out of their deathbed. It doesn't mean that a foreclosure process is going to suddenly stop. Although it can. I've heard stories of that. I've heard stories of people miraculously getting out of their deathbed. I just don't... There's not an A plus B equals C with that happening. And so... But do we trust that no matter what happens, that God, the God that we worship, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, Jesus Christ, God made flesh, is good and loves us and has our best interests at heart? And if we can say that we believe that we trust God in that way, then we can give all of ourselves. And so that's my thoughts, expanded thoughts, non-sermon thoughts about stewardship as trust. And I encourage you guys to extend yourselves beyond what your rational mind might tell you in what you give to the church, whether it's time or money or otherwise. There's lots of ways that you can give to your church. And we'd welcome all of them here at Blue Mound. If you want to just send us a check, we'd really appreciate that. If you're a person that's watching that's not already a part of our congregation. Anyways, this upcoming week I'm going to be talking about commitment and the price of commitment. It's going to be an interesting look, I think, at one of Abraham's covenants and a little bit of a history nerd about covenants, and then Philippians chapter 2 verses 1 through 8, putting on the mind of Christ, and that's going to kind of set us up for making a commitment to God. And some people call those pledge cards. We're not going to do a pledge card. It's going to be a letter, like almost worded like a contract, where persons in the congregation are going to have the ability to fill in blanks and make a commitment to God and leave that commitment on the altar. It's going to be kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm still kind of working out exactly how that's going to look, but should be fun. Should be interesting. Another busy week here at Blue Mound in terms of being the pastor. There's lots of administrative things that I'm finding need to be done in terms of getting ready, preparing ourselves for more activity and more sustainable activity without as much output of effort. Basically looking for more efficient ways of doing things. Right now, if we were to send a church-wide mailing, it would be a lot of handwritten letters. Nobody that I've found yet has a list of mailing labels for the church, or even a spreadsheet that can even be easily translated into mailing labels. And so we have a new church software called Power Church. It's not new software, but it's new for us. That has a lot of that information, but it doesn't have all of that information, and it has to be entered properly for it to be for it to print mailing labels right. And I've gotten some, but it's not necessarily formatted well enough for me to say, hey, I'm going to send out a church-wide letter, and then be able to make that happen within that week. And so there's this balance that you have to take of spending time on things for this Sunday and for next Sunday versus things that are going to have much longer term implications, and trying to balance and prioritize those two different things. I think I mentioned this in last week's video. But anyways, I'm still enjoying things very much here at Blue Mound. I'm enjoying being the pastor here, and it seems to me as if people are still enjoying me very much, even though we have a lot of work to do. I think that's really all I want to say this week. I'm already at 10 and a half minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this off.